think we're live.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. I'm Austin Smook. I'm the Dairy Marketing Manager for Merck Animal Health. I'm pleased to introduce to you today our two speakers. We have Dr. Todd Bilby, who is our Director of Dairy Technical Services at Merck Animal Health, and then Glacia Lopez, who is our Associate Director of our Monitoring Customer Success team. And they are very excited today to talk to you a little bit about targeted reproduction management, and happy to answer any questions that you guys have. So I will turn it over to them, and as we go along or at the end, feel free to submit any questions in the chat.
Thank you so much, Austin, for the introduction, and thanks everybody for participating on this, Ask the Expert live stream. It's my pleasure to have my good friend here and colleague, Dr. Todd Bilby, from the Tech Services Vet team, and with myself here with the Dairy Monitoring Customer Success. We hope that you have some good questions from the audience, regarding reproductive management or how we can use monitoring technologies to improve reproductive performance. So I don't know if we have any questions already coming into the chat, Austin, or you can just, hit us with any questions that you might have.
Hey, Glacia, I'll go ahead and kick it off while we're waiting on people. I know we're here to talk about, reproduction and fertility programs, in combination with monitoring technology. But one of the value propositions of the system like SynSub Dairy is also on health and finding cows that need help ahead of time. What do you see as an opportunity of this feature and benefit for reproductive performance in particular?
That's a good question, Todd. So that's something that I talk about a lot of times when I'm going around and give talks. And actually, if you are watching us here, you can go back to one of the DCRC webinars that I gave a couple of months ago that I actually touch a little bit on that idea. And really is how can you extrapolate something, regarding how can you use technology to manage other areas of the dairy that are going to have a direct impact on repro. And in my point of view, really health has play a big role on how, cows are going to be effectively, inseminated and becoming pregnant in a dairy. So I've got a couple of slides here that I want to, guide the discussion because I can be here talking until tomorrow, me. But it's easier if you get some visuals, for people that are, watching from home, kind of like see what I'm talking about. So I'm just gonna share my screen here very quickly, and then I can show you what I'm talking about. So just let me know when you guys can see my screen, and I will get that started. Can you guys see it? Okay. I think so because I can see here on my end. So one thing, yeah, go ahead.
Nope, I was saying we can see it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So one thing that I like to do, Todd, when we're talking about this is, how much really health influence reproductive performance, right? So I like to go back to this data from Dr. Santos here at the University of Florida. It's a data that, he published this work back in 2010, but actually, if you go to what he's trying to say here, it's timeless, right? It's actually what happened. It's physiology based on this retrospective study that he did looking at cows in California and Florida and some other places. So he looked at, about almost 6,000 postpartum cows and what happened with their first 60 days in milk, and then what it was recorded into the computer, right? What happened at the dairy level and what people put it there and how those health issues really affect reproductive performance, right? So if you see the data that he had in the past, when you look at it about, like 55% of the cows were healthy, which means that they were not diagnosed with any health issues by farm personnel, nor had anything put in the computer. Okay, we know that people managing this, we might have, people diagnosing cows, not putting the computer, or doing the opposite, right? Putting the computer things that are not specifically what is happening with the dairy. But basically, half to 60% of those cows, they experience a smooth transition period, and they, start off their lactation feeling well, not having any health issues. But then he noticed, like, if half of them are doing well, which means that, half of them are having some sort of problems, right? And then what Dr. Santos did was, let me see what's happening with these cows here, and see if there's any difference in reproductive efficiency or performance, based on their healthier or their health status, right? So basically, he thought about what are the key 3 steps that a cow needs to go after, after she calves, to get a good reproductive efficiency. The first thing she needs to do is to get back to cyclicity, right? She needs to cycle, demonstrate strong heats and be able to be inseminated, right? After that first step, she needs to receive insemination and become pregnant, right? So a conception rate will be something that we look at as a second step on that journey of getting that cow pregnant and staying in the herd again. And the third step is to maintain that pregnancy, right? So how many of those cows that got pregnant really maintain that pregnancy throughout the end of lactation, and then starting a following lactation at the herd. So very basic study, very elegant, data set, just to see how can we see those things that happen with the cows after calving and interfere in those 3 key steps, right? So the first one, to talk about the cows coming back in heat, right? So resumption of astrocyclicity. We see here that about 84% of the cows that are healthy, that didn't have anything put in the computer, they got back to cyclicity by that 60 days in milk mark, which means that still, like, we have that 16% of cows not showing any heat or not getting, back on the cyclicity of the herd, which are those like high producing cows. I mean, you can, name it what's happening to those animals, but still not 100%, right? And then if you go, the interesting thing that if you go and look at a case of diseases, even though this is not statistical here for one case, but you can see the numerical difference going down and the trend really going down if the cow has more than one case, right? So which means the cows that have some sort of disease, they really struggle to get back to cyclicity between that time, among the time frame, like for 60 days in milk. Remember, step number 2 is to get those cows pregnant, right? So then the conception rate or pregnancy per AI for that first service, if the cows were healthy, and look at this, 51% of them got pregnant in that first shot, which means, and let's go back in time, we're talking about 2010. So most likely this data is from 2008, 9. How many farms would have a 50% conception rate back 15 years ago, right? That was not a number that we used to see, but Dr. Santos were able to show that if the animal is healthy, they get back to cyclicity faster and they get pregnant. And if if they have some sort of diseases or problems after calving, that pregnancy per AI is going to decrease. So cows struggle if they have some sort of disease. They struggle to start cycling again, and they, struggle to get pregnant. And what about maintaining that pregnancy? The third step that I talked about. Pregnancy loss for healthier cows is about a 10% mark. But then if you really go up and they have a case of disease, one or more than one, the pregnancy loss goes up. So how I can see here is that, if cows have problems after calving, they delay their resumption of astrocyclicity, they struggle to get pregnant, and they have more pregnancy loss. Everything that we don't want, right? And there's like, Lau, so I asked you about monitoring. What about, how can you include monitoring this? So my idea of using monitoring technology and the way that you talk about looking at a health animals is how can we get these cows here that are going to get sick at some point during their, fresh period back to the healthier status faster? That's all I'm asking. Like, can we do this? Can we find those cows quicker than a visual observation at the dairy and get them to the healthier status faster? Right. So that was the question that I had. And based on some data, we can do that. Okay. And what I'm going to show you here is data from the University of Cornell, our friend Julio Giordano, that's some elegant study that I'm going to show you. But first things always, people ask if rumination is really, if the rumination that we're, looking in our system, if that is really reflecting what a cow's rumination status is. And we have this data here from 2009 from British Columbia, showing that, they put grad students there to monitor how many, minutes a day a cow was ruminating. And based on visual observation from those grad students to what is showing the computer, rumination was accurate, right? We got it at 87, I-squared curve there, really nice. So then we go to the use of rumination to manage, the fresh cow period. You can see here, Julio did a really nice study in Cornell. So he put system in cows, and that system was locked in a room, so people at the farm could not see what the computer was saying. So basically, people from a whole year were diagnosing cows with the visual observation, and treating them, putting them in a computer, but they never had any exposure to the system. The system was locked in a room with the computer there. They never saw what was happening, right? So the objective of the study is really to see if the system could flag cows that were sick. If the system, yes, could flag cows were sick. Was that before or after it happened? That's why number 2 here is when. And then describe what happened with those animals, right? So basically, he wanted to see that, cows that show up with that health score, lower than 86, that what we have in our system, if the system will flag cows that were found sick by dairy personnel. That's pretty much what he did. And then he looked at, some of the examples that we have here. Cows that had a DA, for example, 41 on that data set, 98% of them, show up in the health list, or in other words, they were flagged by the system 3 days ahead of time. So I think that's huge. Like, when I asked that question, like, can we get those cows with disorder back to the healthier status faster? And then looking at the system is flagging cows 3 days prior to their being diagnosed by farm personnel. That's huge. Right? I mean, if you think about ketosis, 91% of cows were flagged by the system. Sorry, not diagnosed, flagged by the system a day and a half before. Like indigestion, those are cows that they really didn't know what was going on with those animals, just like some loose manure or whatever. 89% of them flagged by the system on average a half a day, before. So if you get all those animals, 104 in total, 93% of animals were flagged by the system. Again, not diagnosed, but flagged by the system in average 2 days before. So if you have a system in a farm that you can identify those cows earlier, do some sort of support treatment and get them to the healthier status faster, I have a strong belief that will help the reproductive efficiency down the road. So I think that's what I want to touch on. This is just an example of how a cow shows up in the, with the health index being flagged by the system here. Remember, they didn't have exposure to the system, so farm people didn't do anything with this cow until 3 days later when she had that, the DA, the flipping the abomasum to the right, to displace of abomasum, and then she was fixed and then got back to rumination to the normal aspect here. So I believe there is a big opportunity for us there to really be more proactive with these animals that show up in the health list, and be able to get them to get the healthier status faster. But then it's like, so what do we do then with those animals? What can we do? Is that really, we can really show that those cows need some help. So Julio kept working with this, right? So Julio didn't stop only in this trial. So he's been working with this concept for a long time. And now what he's trying to do is just to really try to identify what is wrong with those animals. So one concept that he introduced to us in a training a couple weeks ago is that, you have cows that are going to be alerted by the system and that they are sick, right? So those are the red cows. You have cows that are not going to be alerted by the system and they are not sick. Those are the green cows. But what about those yellow cows? Those are that have alerts by the system, but no evident problem with that animal. Is that animal really going to get sick, or should we do something with that animal, get them to get to the healthier status faster? And then he's still trying to investigate what's going to happen with those animals. But what we do know is that those animals that are flagged by the system and hopefully helped, they get better milk production compared to animals that are diagnosed in a visual observation. So this is a really cool data set that he put together. So here's milk production, right? So you see these two lines going together. This is exactly what happens with healthier animals, right? So you have the solid line is animal with health monitoring, no clinical disease, and then visual observation, no clinical disease. So you expect the milk production is the same. That's exactly what you see there. When you have animals that have a clinical disease or that were flagged by the system, you see that animals are flagged by the system. Their milk production elevated compared to animals that are diagnosed sick by farm personnel. So you can see there's a really opportunity here for us to work with those yellow cows and then get them, back to this healthier status faster, hopefully driving that milk production curve closer to the healthier animals, and then driving the reproduction closer to the healthier animals. So I think that's why I want to, it kind of like extrapolates a little bit. I know that it's like stretching a little bit the, what the system can do, but I think it's a nice way for us to see how we can use monitoring to improve reproduction by looking at the healthier side.
Glacio, did anybody ever look at the severity of disease, like how high that health index goes on the red cows? The higher that goes, is that, fall into an even worse repro? And is there anything we can do there? Or
so that'll be a good way for us to track, right, what's happening with those animals. The thing is that, the severity of how those cows appear in the system, it's actually based on the change in their behavior, right? So that score from 1 to 100 that our system has, it's based on comparing that cow to herself every day based on rumination, days in milk, what's happening in their activity. So basically what happens with that is, compared to her baseline, and then how severe is that from one day to another, decreasing that score and then putting her on the health list. Cows would not show up in the health list if they're not below 86. So all the way to 86, where we see like this cow is having still an okay day, just like us. We're like sometimes you just have like a sore throat or anything like that. You don't feel 100%, but you go ahead and do the work. But there's some days that are not like that. You feel a little bit worse. So when the cows fall into the 86, that's when they show up in the list. But really, those red cows are the ones that are struggling the most. So we don't have a data set to prove it. But based on experience, I would say that those cows are in red. If you don't do something with them, either they're going to exit the herd or they're going to have really bad, like impaired reproductive efficiency if you don't do anything with them.
Yeah, and it seems like it's, as you introduced this concept of the yellow cows, those yellow lined cows, I think all of us can relate to the day before you get sick or 2 days before you get that achy feeling, you start getting tired, right? You go to bed early, you maybe don't eat as much. Me, I run and chug a bunch of vitamin C and zinc and, any other voodoo magic I can find that I think might keep me from getting sick.
Exactly.
But what does the industry currently do, when they see these cows that aren't subclinical and try to keep them from being clinical? What's some current things happening?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because really this is something that we try our best not to tell people what to do, because we want to respect the dairy veterinarian, people that are working with the dairy. You want to respect sometimes you might have a vitamin C from one company in your closet there, and I might have a different pharmaceutical from a different company here when I am getting sick. So we try our best not to tell people what to do. But what we do is just to explain to them what happens, why those cows are showing, and kind of like share good practice that are happening out there for the farmers to talk to their veterinarian and then make sure that they have the best protocol. So what do we see? And then we have to remember what's happening there, right? The system is not diagnosing any disease, right? That's number one. And second, you make a really good comment on cows that are subclinical. We also don't know if those cows are subclinical. They might be, but again, subclinical or clinical disease, those are diagnoses, right? We're not diagnosing anything. The only thing the system does is to compare the behavior of that cow every day to herself and then flag if she's having a different day. It's all behavior based, right? Very strong calculation, no question about it, but it's all based on behavior. And when they show up in the list, it's just telling you she's having an abnormal day. And then when you have an abnormal day, then people can be proactive. And the most successful there is they're really lining up a work to do with those animals, to be proactive on like drenching those animals. Then with drench, to put in some of those, calcium boluses supplement, depending on the lactation. They also do some more investigative clinical exam if there's anything else. So if the cow has a fever, most likely they're going to be a different protocol. They check the others to see if there's any other things that are happening with mastitis to get like a more, I would say, defined protocol for that specific disease. But overall, it's just like what I just said that we do for ourselves. It's just like a lot of fluid, maybe combined with some propylene glycol, something like that, and then some nutritional supplements. But trying to, as much as we can, get that cow to have the rumination back on track. This way, she's off the list. Just like you take all those supplements and you feel good and you're good to go, right? Or aspirin or something like that, and then prevent her to crash a little bit more. So the nice thing about this too, Todd, is that regardless of the protocol you implement, that again, can stress enough, should be discussed with your veterinarian and put in place the way that your dairy personnel can execute. I think those are two key things here. But the nice thing too is that now you can track what's happening throughout the day with that animal. Because in the visual observation, locking up cows after they come back from milking in the morning and working with them and doing something for them, next day you're going to see her is tomorrow morning. Now with the system, you can really track what's happening with her throughout the day. Is that rumination getting back up? Do I need to intervene with her again, maybe in the afternoon, right? To try to get her back to her normal behavior, normal rumination minutes. You know what I mean? So there are different things there that you can do using the system to really help that cow to get back to her normal self and back to productivity and to the healthier status faster.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me when I think about, something as simple as hydration, right? And how little, when you look at research studies, we actually measure water intake. But, how quickly even us can get dehydrated going into a sickness, right? And how much our doctors recommend water, Gatorade, electrolytes, whatever, right? But you think of a cow where's milking 95% of her milk is water, right? So if you think of how quickly dehydration can occur and something as simple as getting them drenched, not that I'm making a recommendation, but basically getting water down their throat, is going to be helpful because they are in already a critical state. And with that much milk flowing out, that much water flowing out of her, dehydration can happen so much quicker, right?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because we've seen that happening with our young stock lines. I know young stock is not a discussion here, but people using our young stock solution, they also see that happen, like when they shift their protocol at the dairy, and the first step is to really hydrate calves that show up in the list. They're seeing a large number of animals getting back to a healthier status faster, and the actually number of treatments with drugs decreasing in those farms just because we're helping them in that critical state. But I know young stock is not the subject here, but it's the same same idea that you just shared.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great discussion. Glaucio, I really like how you laid out, how we can help those cows that are struggling get back to a healthy status faster, and then really how their healthy status or lack thereof can impact reproduction. So, it's good that we can help a cow when she's having a bad day, but obviously, ideally, we want a dairy cow to never have a bad day. And so do you see any opportunity to use monitoring technology to prevent or predict when cows will get sick during early postpartum and be a little bit more proactive in that manner?
That's a really good question, Austin. Thanks for asking that. And I'm happy that I separate some of these slides here because really I can touch on some of those with some visual also for people to see. So I also have some data here that I can show you guys from other researchers working with our system and what they are seeing out there as far as trying to help cows not to get sick or even predict what's happening. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen again. And then I will kind of show you guys what I'm talking about. And again, this is going to be another, probably extrapolation about, how we can use, but I think that's the idea here, right? I mean, we just use, we're all smart people looking at this and we can make our own, reach our own conclusions based on what is being presented, right? So I can see the management of dry cows, an area that has been not explored in the full potential, but it's getting more and more attention, from researchers and for people like managing dairies out there. If you think here from Florida, you have a lot of, and now in Wisconsin, a lot of those data with dry cows, heat stress in dry cows and how that affects not only the lactation for that animal after calving, but also the development of that baby calf all the way to first, second lactation. So we see more people interested now in talking about dry animals and dry cows and how to manage them, right? But let's get back to reproduction. I mean, we have to remember we're talking about repro or Dairy Cattle Reproductive Council. So let's talk about repro. So one thing that I like to discuss here is also the dry cow and how a dry cow period could affect reproductive performance, right? So I'm going to show some data here from two friends of mine, two excellent professors. One is Dr. Ricardo Chabel, also here at Florida, and the other one is Dr. Eduardo Ribeiro at Guelph. So let's think about the dry cows first. Ricardo had a really good, when he was in California and then in Minnesota, he did some work with dry cows, and he wanted to see, how much body condition score change during that dry period would affect reproductive efficiency or, repro numbers for those cows after calving. So he had more than 16,000 cows there in this two commercial herds in California, and they had same people, body condition score cows at dry off and at calving. And then based on that change in body condition score, he would see what happened with cows after calving, right? So he categorized those animals in either like excessive body conditional loss, moderate loss, no body conditional change, or cows that gain body condition during the dry period. Okay, so we're talking about dry period here. Don't forget that. So when you see there are a couple of cows here that I want to highlight, right? They're both at 3.25 at calving, which, basically on research that you see out there will be the ideal body condition score for cows to be calving, right? Somewhere between that 3 to 3.5. So 3.25, good body condition score at calving. But then what happened in the dry period? So one of these cows, she was a 4 when she dried off, so she lost body condition score during the dry period. The second cow, the blue one, she was a 3 and then she gained that 0.25, okay? So those are the two main differences that I want you guys to see. One lost body condition score and one gain. What happened to those animals? We can see the cows that are losing body condition score during the dry period were more susceptible to have problems after calving. And which problems we're talking about? Here you have, excessive loss, moderate loss, no change or gain body condition score. You see here that for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the 6 here items that I have here, uterine diseases, indigestion, if you use antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory use, or supportive therapy, cows that have body condition score loss, they have more of those incidences compared to cows that didn't or gain body condition score. Okay, and how did that affect? So if you think about it, okay, so cows lose body condition score during the dry period. She has, probably a little bit more problems after calving. What's going to happen with those animals when they're inseminated? That's exactly what you're thinking. Cows that have excessive loss, this is first service conception rate, 20% conception rate for those animals with excessive loss, 28% for moderate loss, 33 to no body conditioner loss, and 41%, 42 for cows that gain body condition. Okay, so this was first time, I believe, based on when I was a grad student, was studying this and reading about this. I think this was actually the first time that someone did with such a large data set a comparison about what happens or analogy about what happens if the cows lose body condition during the dry period and their reproductive efficiency for first insemination, right? And Ricardo has been trying to investigate more and more what happens with those cows during the dry period. So when we have the ability to track rumination for those cows in the dry period, that's when he started to get like, oh, okay, you know what? Maybe if I track rumination, I'll be able to predict, based on rumination in the dry period, which cows are going to get sick after they calve. That was his idea at first, right? So what did he do? First thing he did was to see if there was a correlation between rumination in the prepartum and rumination in the postpartum. Like, is rumination minutes before the cow calves in the dry period is similar to what happens after calving? And he saw, it's not this one, this is the one that I want to show. So he saw there was a correlation, right? So cows are not ruminating a whole lot in the dry period. They were also not really high ruminators after calving. If the cow was like really heavy ruminator pre-calving, like in the dry period, she was ruminating a lot after calving, which is good. So he was able to see there was a correlation there. Now, when he talked to see like, maybe these cows are not ruminating a whole lot. Those are the ones that are going to get problems after calving. That was his idea. But basically, what we saw, there was not the hard number of rumination that was, interfering in cows after calving to get sick, but it was actually a variation of rumination. So here you have prevalence of subclinical ketosis that he diagnosed in this study, and prevalence of subclinical hypocalcemia. Cows that have variability in the dry period in the rumination, cows with more variability, they're more susceptible to have those diseases, subclinical diseases, for both. So more variability in the dry period and rumination, more chances to get sick, right? DOA, same thing. If the cow has a lot of variability in the dry period in rumination, more chance to get DOAs. And then milk production, it's exactly what you expect, right? It's the opposite. Cows with low variability in the dry period have better milk production than cows with more variability. So here's the thing. So we have a system that is tracking rumination. That's all the system is doing, right? And then you see that if you have more or less variability of rumination, cows are a bit more susceptible to having problems after calving. So now we're really talking about managing the group, right? Not only the animal. So what are our management practices that we're doing during the dry period that are helping or being deleterious for those cows after calving, right? And then I always show this example, which is a little bit extreme, and I love to show this because this is a real farm, real data. It's okay that the data from 2013, but here we have the rumination minutes on average for the milking cows and for the dry cows, right? Here you see the green line, rumination minutes on average for the lactating cows around that 500 minutes a day, right? And here you have a week in between this, dotted lines here. And here you have the dry cows ruminating from, almost 500 to 300 minutes, and then to 450, then down to 350. And I'll ask the question, so what do you guys think is happening here, right? This is real life. I know it's a little bit extreme, but do you guys have an idea what's happening here? Do you, Todd, have an idea what's happening here? I think you have seen this before.
Is this slug feeding?
Actually it is, because what's happening is that
right?
people were feeding those cows every other day.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get your calendar and you go back to, and this is October, right? November. Yep. You remember that, in other areas of the world, the day comes in a day, month, and year. So if you go back to your calendar, you'll see that this day here was a Monday, and then they fed cows, and then didn't feed on Tuesday, fed them back again on Wednesday, and then Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You see, they're feeding every other day, which is a little bit extreme. But this takes us to think about, what are my, feed bank management for those dry cows? Do they have good quality, fresh food in front of them all the time to avoid rumination variability? Are my cows overcrowded? If you have an overcrowding condition into the dry pen, not every cow is going to eat the same food at the same time, right? So you have the first ones that are going to go there. They're going to eat the good food and first. They're going to get the first ones get in the food bank. And then when they're done, they go out and rest. The other cows are going to come in, eat very quickly, but they're also going to lay down and rest because they're not going to be there just by themselves, right? They're herd animals. So do you think that rumination for those animals are going to be the same? Those are things for us to think about when talking about prevention, right, Austin? So your question was preventing. So I can tell you for sure, like using the system will prevent cows to get sick. What I'm telling you now with the system, you have ways to find within your management practice at the dairy, if you're allowing those cows to be cows, if you're allowing them to have the best, the best lives they could ever have, to prevent them to get sick, therefore improving their reproductive efficiency. That's all I'm saying here. I'm not saying it's going to be, prove everything or it's going to be the best thing in the world, but at least now you have more ways to see what your cows are telling you because they're ruminating. That rumination tells a lot. But also what's a nice thing to see here is that prediction piece, which is getting started now. A lot of people looking at it. So Ricardo and Eduardo are really looking into this prediction piece. And this is a manuscript that just came out, this year from Eduardo Ribeiro at Guelph. And he's trying to really see using the rumination time in health risk to prepartum prepartum dairy cows to predict which ones are going to have problems. And they have, above, cows are going to be above the threshold or below the threshold of rumination. And he can really see, what is happening with those animals. I'm not getting too much into the details here. You guys can all investigate further in that, on that manuscript, but he's really trying to find out what is the threshold that you can have to see if you're going to have more susceptible cows to get sick after calving, right? And he really saw that cows below the threshold, there was high risk for clinical diagnosis at day 15. So you can really see here days relative to calving. This is cows, the rumination minutes on the prepartum period. So you see rumination in the dry period. What is how much that affects or how much that can help you to predict animals that are going to get sick. And you see the same, right? For rumination time, this rumination time minutes from the days relative to calving. Here's the same thing after calving. Look at the rumination after those cows calve, right? And here's everything in combined, before zero, here's going to be calving time, right? So kind of nice to see, how we can start using the system to try to identify early on which cows are going to be susceptible to having problems after calving. And again, Ricardo also doing a lot of experiments, collecting data from a lot of farms, and look not only on prediction portion, so that's the predicting health disorders, but also putting everything into a model where he can, at the end of the day, profitability is what's going to drive the decisions, right? So if what is see here, based on everything that is coming from the system, as far as predicting which animals are going to get sick and what to do with those animals, how profitable that's going to be for the dairy, So, and that how tied up reproduction is with profitability. So we can see here, we can extrapolate, but you can see a lot of, of those things combining and making sense, I think, So, I hope that answers your question, Austin. It was a long answer to your question, but using the system, there are opportunities for us to see, what's what's happening with those animals and what it can do to be more proactive and try to avoid those cows to get sick, like in a herd level type, like in a group level type of settings.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that talking about this, especially if you're not familiar with monitoring technology, it can seem very advanced and very different. But when you think about it, I mean, even if you just think about the idea of taking an employee and having them watch a single cow 24/7 and all the different things that you would observe and pick up and be able to predict earlier, just with having someone visually observe her 24/7, and then you add in the technology piece, I think that really helps frame up kind of the impact that it can have.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it really, I like the dry cow work because it's interesting how we have done such a great job as an industry evolving our dry cow management, and with technology on them, it really, as you mentioned, opened your eyes to why it's so important to manage dry cows better. And I mean, that goes along with all the heat stress data coming out of Dr. Dole at University of Florida, right? And then, man, it used to be dry cows, right? When they got dried, you hit them with vaccines, you hit them with whatever, instantly dry them off. So they go from milking to dry. You pull them from a high lactation pen, you stick them in a dry cow pen that you might have shade in, you might not. I mean, they were treated like, hey, you're not making me money anymore, get out of my way. And it's good to see with technology on them how important it is to manage them year round, right? All the time. So I always used to say my nutrition knowledge revolves around skinny cows don't breed. That was my nutrition knowledge. I use that in beef cow talks. I use that in my dairy. That's all my nutrition knowledge. That's all I know. Just don't give me a skinny cow and I might get her pregnant. But some of that body condition score loss really sheds light on just how impactful that stuff is. So.
Yeah, and it's nice also to see, Todd, and you interact with these professors, a lot, and being a professor yourself in the past, how, the line of thought and how people work, some of the things that you try to see a correlation there and you try to see something. And I think Ricardo did a great job on exploring that portion and the body condition score loss in the dry period. Mm-hmm. And then I also have to see how much the evolution of technology helped us to get to the point we are today. Because even when we have those collars with rumination, the first collars we had, the communication with the system was an infrared. Cows need to go to a portal, right?
Mhm.
And dry cows don't go to a portal. They don't go to milk and parlor every day, right? So we didn't have really ways to track those animals. When we got the evolution of the system to go to a long distance antenna, and people start really seeing value on tagging those cows and leaving the tag on for the whole lactation period, even the dry period, don't want to be changing colors. That's when Ricard said, "Oh, now it's an opportunity for me to see, that idea that I had in the body condition, can that be translated into rumination? Because now I can track rumination." So it's kind of fun to see how, someone like Ricardo, some of these smart guys can get a concept they have in their head and use the evolution of the technology to try to answer some of those questions. I think that's for me is fascinating.
Yeah, me too. I think it's interesting watching this all evolve, as you say, where we've come. And then I think even with technology, how it's shed so much light from a research perspective, right? I think as a grad student, how I would have loved to have had something out there so I didn't have to go out there. But just how monitoring a cow every minute of every day of her life, I think is going to open up doors for years to come of exactly, where we need to dial in and be more efficient. So.
And I know exactly the feeling, Todd, because when I was a graduate student, so I had experience being a student in Brazil and then moved to the US, right? So in Brazil, going to repro now, which is, supposed to be the fun part and the most important thing for this Ask the Expert. When I was in Brazil, I was sharing with you yesterday, use that heat watch or some of those, other heat detection devices. People are still developing something like that. Doing that in Brazil with Roberto Sartori at Embrapa when he was there. And then when I came to the US in Wisconsin, I was one of the first ones with Dr. Fricke to work with the system, to try to identify what is the physiology behind what's happening with those cows and, how many hours after peak of activity cows ovulate and what's the best time to breed. Those are the questions that we start asking ourselves. And that was in 2009, right? I mean, it's a lot of evolved in these last 15 years. And I was happy to be a graduate student at that time, being the first one to work with the systems. And now working with this is just great to see the evolution of this past 15 years.
Yeah. When I was collecting my thoughts for what I was going to talk about today, I laughed to myself because I had so many conversations in my head that started with, I remember when, and I was like, man, am I at that age? Surely not. Surely I'm not at that age where I'm giving historical perspectives of how we've evolved in a good way over time. But I'm pretty sure, I guess I'm at that age. I'm like, I'm really going to be depressed when somebody invites me to speak on my historical perspective. That I need grayer hair before that happens. Okay. But anyway, it's good to hear on this technology and, talking about targeted reproductive management. And I just jump into that. You really set the stage nicely why getting the cows through the fresh pen and in dry period correctly. And how important tackling those disease quick and getting those cows healthy and how that has a role in reproduction. And we're going down the roads, right, of more and more of managing cows individually, right? I mean, that's where we continue to go with these tags on or collars on them. We can manage a cow more individually and talking about synchronization hormones and things. And here's a remember when, right? I remember when, the whole pre-sync idea came about, right? And that was published 2001, why we pre-synchronize cows. And the whole reason behind pre-synchronization was so that we could force cows to be in the right stage of their estrus cycle, right? Between days 5 and day 9 of their estrus cycle. So when they started started that first GnRH, you had the best opportunity to ovulate her. And then so many days later, you give her prostaglandin and breed off of heats. And I remember, because I landed in Central Valley of California, I'd left Florida, And I remember going around to producers to try to convince them that the way they're going to etch out their next few points of pregnancy rate, which at that time I was telling people we got to hit a 20% preg rate. That's ideal at that time, right? If we can hit that, we're making headway. And man, you'd have thought I had a third eye when I told them you needed 2 more shots of prostaglandin 14 days apart and schedule that 10 to 12 days before OVSync. And it was like, no way am I going to put any more shots in. You just convinced me at OVSync. Now you're a whole nother day of the week. I got to give shots, right? And now I'm giving shots 2 days of the week instead of 1. And then it went to 3. And now when double OVSync came, now it's, more shots there, and they've become more trained of being able to put more shots in. But, it's interesting with technology now, being able to manage at an individual cow level and being able to more target how we do reproduction. And going back to my point about pre-sync, we use those hormones to force cows to be in the right stage of the cycle because we didn't know what stage of the cycle they were in, right? That's the whole reason we gave it. And so now with technology, knowing previous heats, we, at least for the ones that show an estrus, right? Those ones with previous heats, we can now start dialing in on what stage of the cycle she's in and be able to give our reproductive hormones more efficiently, right? And so, as an example, I'll use 2 examples, and I've got slides. I don't know if they're working, but I kind of like just chatting unless somebody puts in the comments, Todd Bilby, be quiet and show some slides. But when we give prostaglandins today, and still a majority of people will go out and give a group of cows a prostaglandin injection at a random stage of their estrus cycle in order to get them to show a heat or to pre-synchronize them. And we know that the first 5 days of a cow's estrus cycle, she has a very low response to prostaglandin. So now with technology, we don't need to lose. That's basically 25% of your shot you're wasting, right? Because roughly 25, so 4 to 5% of cows show a heat per day on a 20-day estrus, a 21-day estrus cycle. That's roughly 4 or 5%. So over that 5-day period, that's 20 or 25% of your cows you're giving a shot of prostaglandin that it's not doing anything, right? And so, as I'm thinking through, always get asked, and I'm sure you do, Glacione, chime in on this, but, where's our next point of preg rate? Where's our next few points of conception? And where do we get more efficient, which I love. I love those conversations. And it used to be solved with, obviously, fresh cow issue and all the things you talked about is very important. But, we could quickly go to add another shot here and add another shot there, right? And all the shots that we add to chase 4 or 5 points of conception. But now, knowing previous heats and if they're in heat, we can dial in on the exact stage of the cycle that we need a prostaglandin, right? And so maybe if your preg rate is awesome, and DCRC in there, geez, it's surprising every year, right? Their awards ceremony with how high preg rates and conception rates people are getting today. But now I'm wondering, okay, I'm not saying we've hit a ceiling with high repro for those herds that are in the 40s or preg rate or whatever the case may be, but maybe it's maintaining that high preg rate, but getting it more efficiently, right? Just scheduling our shots in a better way so we give less of them, or less labor to achieve that, less lockup times that maybe will prevent us from losing some milk, especially in the summer and heat stress, right? So maybe it's more efficiently targeting these animals and our preg rates still stay high. Or for some herds, it's going to be continuing to elevate and get higher pregnancy rates. But I think
so, Todd,
going down, using previous estrus and using our technology. Yep, go ahead.
So we got a question in the chat that I think is really appropriate here, maybe a little bit of a different spin on the topic that you were speaking to. But the question is there a specific herd size or performance level in terms of 21-day pregnancy risk, energy corrected milk, etc., that a dairy needs to achieve before thinking about implementing a monitoring system?
I
So
think that's
Glacio, if you
no. I think that's a good question. That came from Rafael, good friend. Rafael, thanks for sending that question. And it's really, I mean, he already know my answer, but it's nice that he asked that, right? So the first thing that I would say is basically no, right? I mean, and I would say that it's more dependent on what are the goals for the farm. What are the dairy goals and what they want to achieve, and what is doable, right? As Todd just explained, like we have excellent reproductive protocols, fertility programs that give us cows pregnant, a number of them, right? A high conception. But then we get back to like, should I be doing it? Are my cows eligible to receive it? What that type of treatment? I mean, people good enough to give those all those injections in a timely manner and make sure that the compliance is there. So that's one thing to think about. The other one is location and facilities, right? I mean, some facilities, people do a really good job on tail chalking cows and try to find cows in heat. So they might not perceive a problem and they might not see there's a need for someone to use an electronic system on the reproduction side, or they might think that they are doing a great job on monitoring fresh cows. They might not see a need to do that. What I can see, Rafael, that I see that's for me the most interesting is like, do you see a room for improvement in your dairy that you're not reaching to what we have now? I think that's the first question you need to ask. Regardless of your preg rate, regardless of how many cows you get sick, regardless of those KPIs are see all the time. How many cows exit the herd by 60 days in milk, all of those metrics, right? Because we do have people that come in and invest in the system because they want to get better in their reproduction, right? So they have, I don't know, 25, 30% preg rate. They want to get to the 40s now, and they want to increase the service rate and things like that. So I would say that, as a rule of thumb, if your service rate is in that mid 60s, and you're trying to, train your people, look at your cows, and you're not getting the results you want with, basic tail chalk, there's an opportunity as there to improve insemination rate for sure, because we see on again farms hitting that mid 70s to 80% service rate. So that's going to jump your pregnancy rate, right? But in the other side, we see farms that are, Todd, we're together 2 weeks ago in our training, and 2 out of the 6 case studies we present to the tech services vet team, 2 dairies, they were platinum award winners at DCRC, and they decided to invest in the system. They're using our system. I'm not going to tell which dairies we're talking about, but it's just like based on the training we had, we shared some of that internal number. But do you remember that talking about those dairies? They didn't need it for repro. They really want to streamline the way they want a group monitoring, and they want the fresh cow flag system. So it all depends on, what the farm wants to do and how you can implement that. Farms are doing an awesome job. I have no question about it. But the last thing that I want to mention on this question specifically is we are in a race for efficiency. Farms need to be efficient, right? If you think from 1992, if you look at how many farms are exiting the dairy business from 1992 to today, right? So we have farms decreased from 142,000 farms, we're less than 30,000 farms now. So if you think about that, with that mentality of farms exiting the dairy business, the same idea of cows exiting the herd, how do you increase the milk production from a day to another in a dairy farm? You cool the cows are not producing as much, right? If you cool 10% of your bottom producing cows, what happens to milk production? It goes up. If you cool the farms that are not doing really well, what happens to the efficiency? Goes up, right? So we're in a level of efficiency today that people, one, need to be efficient to stay in their business, and second, they're find what is the next step of being more efficient. And I believe that if they're not using a monitoring system and they want to get the next step of efficiency, they should be looking at it. So it's not how high my preg rate is or how low it is, how my milk production is on the NH corrected milk. I think those numbers at the end of the day, it's not that they're important, but they're really irrelevant to this discussion. It's really like, what do I want to achieve between now and the next 5 years that I cannot do today, and how much a monitoring system could help me to get there, either get there in 5 years or even faster. I hope that makes sense, Rafael. I think it's a very good question you had, because we have that discussion all the time, right? But really, it's like, how can we be more efficient? Tying up what you said, Todd, talking about managing the individual, we talk about efficiency. That's what we want. We want more efficient cows, right? And you talk about the target reproductive efficiency. Do you mind if I show a slide, Todd? I know that you don't want to show there, but I have one slide here that I really want to show, because I think it ties up
jump in.
well to what you just said. This is one of the, Ricardo and Julio again, and I'm not going to say that I hate going back to those two guys, because they're good friends and they're doing an outstanding job. But look at this, what Ricardo is doing in Florida. This is one of the trials that he published, talking about target reproductive management and performance, right? So control cows all the way to double off sync. And then here in the target repro management, he would manage cows if they had or didn't have an estrus during the voluntary waiting period. Exactly what you're saying, Todd. How can I be more strategic about using the hormones, right? How can I be more intentional on which cows are going to give a shot? That's exactly what you said, right? So basically, you think about, you have the control cows here and the target repro management. Regardless of the performance on what's the first conception rate and things like that, let's look at the efficiency. And for me, that's key. When you look at the rate in which cows get pregnant, either they are the same, or the target repro cows get pregnant a little bit faster. You see target repro, either they are the same, or your first service here is faster, but in an efficiency standpoint, when you get towards the end of the lactation, the target repro for primiparous, you have less, you have, even though you have a little bit more that is open, but you have less percent of cows open at the end. That's for primiparous. But what happens with multiparous? You have 12 days less to get cows pregnant, and half of them, stayed in the herd, or they're open at the end. So kind of like, when you think about it, how can we be efficient? Regardless of reproductive efficiency in a standpoint of like preg rate or conception rate, what it matters at the end of the day. At the end of the day is the efficiency and the rate you get cows pregnant and how well you get it done, right? So I think this is something for us to think about. But I want to highlight here one thing, Todd, if you allow me just to jump into what you're saying.
Sure. Yeah.
How do you do this? How do you manage this in a farm level? There's no way for you just to have an electronic system that is telling you heats, right? That's just part of the equation, right? For me, really, the key here is you have to have a really robust dairy management software. Connecting those dots. You have to have a sorting gate with a palpation alley to help you to manage those animals, right? Because then you're going to have cows coming in the list every day. So let's say, for what you just said, Todd, a cow came in heat 14 days ago, and I know that, day 15, I want to give that prostaglandin. So cows are going to come in every day to get that prostaglandin shot and come in heat, right? And they're coming heat 3 to 5 days later. So they need to be also identified by the system and sorted to a palpation alley to be inseminated. So they're different. So now we're looking like, how can the monitoring system help me to get that jump in management level? We're talking a lot about managing cows, but how about our overall management level? How we can make that better? And how can we achieve more efficiency based on what the system is telling us? So it's not the system alone. We need to have a really good dairy management software. And for me, I would never deploy a system like this in a target repro management if I don't have sorting gates or an efficient way to find cows that need to get those specific injection at specific time.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on with where I was going as far as efficiency and some of the stuff you showed, because I think as an industry, right, we focus, and you and I talked about this a few days ago, focus so much on a 21-day preg rate or first AI conception, even in research, right? It's published the first and second preg check, right? It's 30 and 60 days, and you go look at how well the fertility did, and that's where it stops. But I think that's where we need to continue to follow through lactation and looking at things like speed at which they get pregnant, right, is just as important. Or you showed the number of cows open at the end that, right, half of them were saved. Longevity is something our industry continues to talk about and should be a higher thing to talk about, because we don't have as many heifers as we used to, right? And so keeping cows in the herd longer, and I mean, a lot of other metrics besides preg rate and conception rate at first AI
Correct.
need to be evaluated to look at efficiency, right? Because there's a lot that goes into being efficient and maintaining a high fertility, not just a high preg rate.
Correct. That's excellent. I see another question coming there, Austin.
Sorry about that. Had my mic muted. There's a question in the chat around, potential other technology to, detect heat or potentially, birthing alerts, things like that. And, I'll let you guys chime in, but really, I think, it goes back to the conversation that you just had around, the value of monitoring technology is about way more than just detecting heats. And there's lots of ways where you could effectively visually observe a heat, but then you look at the percentage of cows that don't cycle naturally, understanding how long it's been since they've had a cycle, where they're at, how other factors are maybe affecting whether or not they're showing a heat. So I think I guess my big takeaway from what you've already said would be that sure, there's lots of ways to detect a heat, but the targeted repro management of using monitoring to better manage each individual animal and her reproduction, I think that's what sets it apart. So I'll stop talking and let you chime in. But
no, I think it's a good summary. We talked about, Austin, but I also don't want to dismiss the question here because it's a very relevant one, because it's asking about AI and use of cameras. Which I think it's we talk about like what's new in the technology business or in the technology world. I would say that we still don't know, right? I mean, that's still an explored arena for us, the use of artificial intelligence. I would say that, not only us, but, universities are doing a lot of work on trying to incorporate artificial intelligence into animal behavior and use that for like actionable items, like actual steps that you can do at a farm level. I have a really good friend, Dr. João Doria, working out of the University of Wisconsin, and he's the one that has been pioneering this use of cameras. And even though cameras are great, a greater way for you to track what's happening in the dairy, there's still a lot of unknowns, right? So we're talking about monitoring technology here on the, the neck collar that we're talking about. There's 15 years in use, and other years in the past using, as research to validate and put the product in the market. With cameras, there's a couple of things that we have to think about. One is the positioning of the camera and how the camera is analyzing the data, right? I mean, if you look at Dr. Doria's presentation, it's actually fun when he looks and when he shows his decision-making process of where to put the cameras and how, depending on where you put, the cows can pass in front of each other, or the cows can, the system can really identify the cows based on the white spots, black spots, and things like that. But also another thing is data storage. I think that's one of the biggest, I would say, bottlenecks for computer vision and use of cameras at this moment. If you think about how much web space or how much space it's using AWS or you name it, and every time they use a space that large, you spend money, right? I mean, companies you just pay for that storage. That makes the time, the adoption, as far as like how much money you would have to invest to get a system like that operating in a level where you have, think about a 10,000 cow dairy, monitoring 10,000 cows with cameras all the time, storing those images. It makes it challenging, I would say. So I would say there's work being done in that aspect from renowned professors in universities, which looks very promising. That is just a couple of those things that I have to think about as the implementation goes and how we can make that accessible. So it's still on the works. So I think my point is that don't wait until you have something like that in cameras to invest. If you want to invest in monitoring technology, because we don't know how long it's going to take for that to be, in the level what we have today with the colors and the behaviors we're tracking, or better. I think that's my point.
Yeah, thanks, Claudio, for answering that question. And reminder to everybody else, feel free to continue chatting your questions, and if there's any specific topics you want to get into with Dr. Bobby and Claudio.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't know. I mean, we got already like an hour, 6 minutes here. I don't know if you want to. I don't see any more questions coming into the to the comment session here.
Yeah, I know. One of the really hot topics, pun intended, is around heat stress. And so, fortunately, we're now coming out of the warmer part of the year, where cows can sometimes suffer with heat stress. And we also know how big of an impact that can have on, the reproductive performance and success of a dairy. So, do you see a use for monitoring technology such as Sense Dairy to help producers with, challenges during the summer months, especially depending on where they're located, having, more or less of a challenge with heat stress and how that impacts reproduction?
Yeah, I can tackle that real quick. I'll start it with I remember when. That was my thing earlier, but we used hobos, like these, we put these devices on cedars and stick them in cows, and they would run around for about a week. Sentinel cows, we would pull them out, download it onto the computer. There'd be a bazillion data points, and we'd try to make graphs and come up where on the dairy these animals were heat stressed, so we could pinpoint bottlenecks on the farm. And again, I wish I had technology back then, because that would have saved me a lot of time and headaches. But now with technology looking at heavy breathing, and there's data to show how correlated vaginal temperature is with heavy breathing, and this technology will be able to detect those panting. And, obviously the higher the heavy breathing, the more heat stressed she is, and the lower we can keep that, the better. And so having this technology on there, you can now troubleshoot again 24/7 anywhere on your farm that these cows are and where they're getting hot, whether that's, even dairies that I go to that have a lot of cooling, and they're saying, man, we still have struggles. But then you walk out there and a third of their fans aren't working, and, and the water spray for some reason got turned off. And it allows you to really pinpoint what pen, where at on the dairy, to what degree. And maybe it's, you don't need more fans and soakers. You just need to make sure your employees don't turn them off, or you got to clean them, or, or the nozzle head size is the right size, or the soakers aren't getting caught in the wind. I mean, there's a lot of other things. There is still opportunity for farms that don't have proper cooling, but now with this technology in there, you can say, hey, what's going on with pen 2, 3, and 4? Or you might be doing everything you can. And, there's situations like down in Texas, we throw all the cooling at them we can, but there's still, you can't air condition the barn yet. So you can't overcome everything. So then you look at, hey, maybe my lactating cows need to be over here on this, because this barn's cooler than this barn, or whatever. Right. So it allows you to make these management changes, and heat stress is so effective against our taking repro down, fresh cow disease, all the things we've talked about today. And our climate's not getting cooler. So, being able to use this technology, looking at heavy breathing across cows and pens, and I think that's a great opportunity to really, again, chase that higher efficiency.
That makes sense.
Well, Todd, I know you have to jump off. I just wanted to take a moment real quick to say thank you for joining us today. So if there's any final questions, feel free to chat them. Otherwise, I think we can wrap up here. And just to close us out, I mean, both Todd and Glacio are past DCRC presidents, and so we feel very fortunate to have them on here today, and to have them be part of Merck Animal Health, where we're really trying to offer this full solution approach with expertise and a portfolio that supports a more holistic approach to caring for cows. So appreciate that. It looks like we maybe have one more question here.
I also would say, Austin, thank you for helping us here and for managing the questions that are coming in. So one thing that I want to reinforce to you for people that are watching now or going to watch this later, that if you have any other questions in the future, of course, that we're more than happy to answer that. But also we want to drive attention to the council, right? So, direct your questions. You can go to our website, but, everything that we presented here, it's part of our, partnership and long-lasting relationship with DCRC. So any question you have, you can just go there and click on the button and communicate with them, and they would reach out to us. Or even in the Ask the Expert, they have other people that are, within the organization that will be more than happy to help you guys. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully we see a lot of people next week. DCRC annual meeting.
That's right.
That's right.
So,
yes.
Yeah. Cornerized conversations.
And a lot of that data that I talked today about Ricardo, he's going to be presenting that, right? I mean, we can tell people that Ricardo is going to be giving a pre-conference seminar that is sponsored by Merck, but that's right before the evening reception, the day before the meeting kicks off. So everybody is welcome to come and join that presentation from Ricardo, which is not commercial. It's just very based on the data that he's been working on. And I saw here a question about Layli. I'm not sure. I've never worked with Layli before, so I'm sorry I can't help you with that question, Mr. Safa. So I don't see anything else there, Austin. So I think just thank DCRC for the opportunity. Thanks everybody for coming in and sending the questions and participating with us. It's been a pleasure. And it's always a pleasure working with DCRC.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.